In January this year, the release of footage which showed almost naked members of the Jarawa tribal community dancing in the Andaman Islands, apparently in exchange for food, triggered international outrage. How could an ancient tribe thought to be descendants of some of the first humans to move out of Africa 1 million years ago be made to do this? How can tourists be allowed into Jarawa areas in the first place to be a part of human safaris into tribal reserves? Stung by the criticism, the Andaman and Nicobar administration has clamped down. But follow-up reports in the international media seem to suggest that this reprehensible practice of tribal tourism is continuing. So what's the truth? And is this entirely a one-sided story of the Jarawa being victims? I spent several days in the Andaman Islands trying to understand the truth behind one of the most profound socio-cultural conundrums of our times: the need to preserve and protect ancient tribal rights while debating the merits of integrating tribal communities with what we refer to as the modern world. If you thought this documentary would have me travelling undercover into tribal Jarawa reserves to bring you shocking footage of the abuse of the ancient tribal community, you would be badly mistaken. Quite besides the fact that filming the Jarawa invites a 5-year jail term, getting into the reserve is really quite easy. The journey through the Jarawa reserve isn't any feat of investigative journalism. It's something done by tourists every single day. All that one needs to do is to buy tickets, 850 rupees for a non-AC coach, 1000 rupees for an AC bus. These are tickets given out by the government. Now the tour to Baratang is quite popular over here. It goes through the Jarawa reserves, but there are strict rules on either side about what you can and you can't do once you're in the reserve. Some people say that this amounts to human safaris. Other people say it's like watching our fellow citizens as animals in a zoo. What's the reality of this? That's something I'm going to find out about this journey through the Andaman trunk road all the way to the north of the island. The word Jarawa Reserve sounds wrong, doesn't it? Sounds awfully like wildlife reserve. That actually is part of the problem. One of the issues associated with segregating the Jarawa is the language we all use to describe the areas where they live. For perhaps 1 million years, these areas have been home to the Jarawa, but today we call them Jarawa Reserve. Sounds like a zoo. The drive to the Jarawa areas through a winding road surrounded by thick forests on either side isn't the most comfortable. The road is bumpy at stretches and quite narrow, but in fact, this very road, the Andaman Trunk Road as it's known, is at the center of the great Jarawa conundrum. Well, this is just about where the reserve begins. This is a place called Jirkatang. Beyond this, we can't use our cameras at all because the Jarawa reserve begins from this point onwards. It's a curious experience. We are in a part of our own country where we can see our own countrymen, but we can't communicate with them and we certainly can't film them at all. And despite which you have a scenario where you've got tourists coming into this area. So tourists are allowed to enter and drive through this road, the Andaman Trunk Road, and they can look at the Jarawa people in case they are there on the road. They can't film them and they certainly can't interact with them. And the rules about this are absolutely clear. And this is what the government is now enforcing hard. It says, drive the vehicles carefully, only in a convoy. Solitary driving risks your life and property as well as that of the Jarawas. Do not allow the Jarawas to get into the vehicle. Do not give any eatables or clothes to them. do not indulge in photography, videography either in the Jarawa Tribal Reserve or jarawas. Otherwise you'll be liable for legal action including seizure of the camera or the mobile. So the rules are absolutely clear, and we're going to respect these rules. As we enter this reserve area, we will not be filming the jarawas. But what does strike us is that the people we are traveling with on this convoy are in this journey for only one purpose: to travel through this reserve area and to see the jarawas. The big question, is this indeed a human safari? And does the phrase human safari have to do essentially with the racist mentality of so-called people like us, tourists who don't think twice about traveling to an island in the middle of the Bay of Bengal to catch a glimpse of dark-skinned, semi-naked, spear-wielding tribals with African features? Is it the mindset of many of our own citizens that poses perhaps the greatest danger to the Jarawa? Are you looking forward to going through the reserve?
Yeah.
You think you're going to be able to spot some of the jarawas over there?
Looking forward for that.
Is that the reason you've come?
Both looking for those native people and also what's that, mangrove forest.
Yeah.
Just to drive through that mangrove forest in the jet, whatever it's that thing, and also there is one cave.
Then you're going to see the limestone.
Limestone and this baratang. That person's Adivasi.
So you're going to see this Jarawa people over here.
Yeah.
So that is the main reason you've come.
Yeah.
तो आपको अजीब नहीं लग रहा है कि आप एक जगह में जा रहे हैं जहाँ जो आदमी लोग यहाँ जो रहते हैं,
जी
वो आप जू के अंदर जैसे आपको नहीं लग रहा है आप जा रहे हो?
हाँ, like something like that.
We are just going.
We are just going now.
Afterwards you can say that how we feel.
But tourists aren't the only people going through the Jarawa homeland. There are trucks and taxis, all part of a convoy. It's a daily routine. There are 4 convoys a day from Jirkathang to the north and the other way as well. As many as 10 lakh people use the road every year. Of this, no more than 85 to 90,000 are tourists. Still a considerable number. It's time to leave. A siren has been sounded and the loudspeaker with warnings from the police have announced the rules to people going through the reserve. Cameras actually get switched off. We are now entering the Jarawa reserve and it's strictly prohibited to have cameras in use. Our journey on the Andaman trunk road takes us from Port Blair in the south through the Jarawa belt to Middle Strait in the north. Areas marked here are restricted areas where the Jarawa reside. We will end our journey at Middle Strait, beyond which the convoy shifts to ferries before recommencing their journey north by road to areas like heavily populated Diglipur and Mayabandar. Well, this is the other side of the Jarawa Reserve, and for people wanting to travel to the north of the island, this is as far as this stretch of the road gets. You get onto one of these ferries, and it's not just tourists, it's not just people who live in the north, but also buses and trucks full of supplies for the north. You then cross this Middle Strait, and then the road starts again, and then you travel to the north. So what did we see during this journey from the other side of the reserve to this area? Nothing. Nothing at all. Did we see a single Jarawa tribal? No, not at all. Does that mean that they don't exist? Not at all, they certainly do. But the point being made by the administration is this. There is one stretch of the road, the only road which exists over here. The convoys which move in this area move at a speed of about 40 kilometers per hour. There are escorts on every bus and the buses don't stop at all. So even if tourists are to see Jarawa tribals, there is no real interference between the tribals and the tourists. If that's the case, then why is everyone so worried about the Jarawa? And what if someone were to ask this? When you go up to Alaska to see the way of life of Eskimos and take a look at the igloos the Eskimos have traditionally lived in, do you call that a human safari? If not, then should visiting jarawa areas be considered all that different? To get an answer to this question, we need to travel halfway around the world to the UK to meet Sophie Grigg, the world's foremost jarawa campaigner associated with the NGO Survival International.
The fundamental point is about respect and consent. So if tribal peoples have wanted to invite outsiders into their land, maybe to make money through tourism, that's obviously their choice, and that's absolutely fine, and they should be respected, and of course that's okay. What's happening in the Andamans is nothing like that. The Jarawa haven't invited people into their land. They've shown they don't welcome people. In fact, they have no control and no say over it, and that's really the important point. Every day all those people flock to the Jarawa's land to look at them and ogle at them like they're animals in a safari park, with no question about whether this is something they want or if they want to participate in this. And it's that lack of respect and lack of consent and control, and really the Jarawa have to be able to have control over their land and its resources, and that includes deciding who can and who can't come into their land, and until that happens, their rights are not being respected.
But while no one questions the fundamental respect due to the Jarawa, the administration in the Andaman says all communities have to be given respect, and that certainly includes the settlers to the north of the island. Today more than 1,25,000 people, many of whom you see here catching the ferry across Middle Strait, live in North Andaman, in towns like Diglipur and Mayabandar. Many of these citizens are settlers brought into the islands over the decades. To them, the convoy system through Jarawa areas is a time-consuming irritant. Think about it. 406 Jarawa occupy 1,028 square kilometers in the Andamans. Compare that as an example with this statistic. 22,000 people live in the 5-kilometer buffer zone around Jarawa territory, in 850 square kilometers, of which only 6% is available because of the dense forest cover. But more than people in the buffer zone, it is the lakhs of people who live in the north who depend on the road for their survival.
There is no alternative to this route because it's based on the island is more of a north to south kind. So this is the sole route. The sea route is very it's rather difficult to maneuver, and it takes a very long time, and it's dependent also on the weather.
For activists in the region, this explanation is just not good enough. Dennis Giles, the editor of the Andaman Chronicle, has been fighting for the rights of the Jarawa for years. He points out that the administration is disregarding orders of the Supreme Court, which accepted the 2002 Shekhar Singh report, which suggested that the Andaman Trunk Road be shut down.
See, administration has already been violating right from 2002. It has been violating, and the argument what I learned the administration has, that the Supreme Court never had any specific order. It never passed a specific order to close down this particular stretch of road. In that case, I would like to ask the administration, when the Supreme Court said to follow all the recommendations of Shekhar Singh, to implement it on the ground, that time in 2002 you decided to remove all the forest encroachment, and you used elephants. It was like in a most inhumane manner. It's like you made people to come to a situation of hand to mouth, and that was also one of the recommendations of Shekhar Singh. If that was followed, why you never tried to implement this particular suggestion of Shekhar Singh to shut down this particular road? You have been continuing, now it is 10 years.
But the administration says it's on firm legal ground. They point out that the Supreme Court passed orders on only 20 of 47 recommendations made by the Shekhar Singh report, and there was no specific order to shut down the road. Neither is the administration opposed to expanding ferry services to the north. But while this may enable a provision banning the entry of all tourists into Jarawa areas, no one is talking about shutting down the road altogether.
But we have got the funding from the Planning Commission as well as the Ministry of Surface Transport has given us all help, and their ALHW, one of their organizations, is planning to build jetties which will take care of this problem, and hopefully the ground survey work is going on, and it is expected in the next few years this project will be completed. So then the tourists from Port Blair will be taken by ship.
The administration also explains that the Andaman trunk road is of critical strategic importance. A potential military lifeline between the Tri-Services Command at Port Blair and North Andaman. They point out that North Andaman is just 20-odd kilometers away from the Coco Islands, a Burmese territory which has reportedly been leased to China, which uses it as a listening post. So what's the larger story? Just who's right in this battle between the need to protect the Jarawa with the need to meet the needs of the settlers to the north? Most of all, can the Jarawa be integrated with what we call modern society? Some say there are already signs of that. Some of the Jarawa understand basic Hindi. Some have become accustomed to the taste of salt with their food, and if there's a medical emergency, the Jarawa are known to interact with an autonomous government-endorsed body, the Andaman Adim Janjati Vikas Samiti, which monitors the community and is a link between the Jarawa and the outside world. So are the Jarawa ready to integrate more closer to society as we know it? Pramod Kumar, who has completed his PhD on the language spoken by the Jarawa, has interacted extensively with the community, travelling deep into Jarawa territory where he spent years meeting the Jarawa and understanding their customs.
See, they are interested in only what the government is providing to them. They are mostly interested because they don't take anything from local settlers. So it's not that they want contact. Yes, you will find young people visiting local settlers or visiting on the roadside, but these young people are, you can say, like unemployed people in their community, because at certain age they start going for hunting, gathering foods.
But while the Jarawa are largely content living in the jungle, what about the other tribal groups in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands? Has integration between tribal societies and the world outside worked successfully on any of the islands? In fact, it has. Today, several years after it was devastated by the impact of the tsunami, I return to the island of Car Nicobar, 280 kilometers to the south of Port Blair. Though comparing the situation of the Jarawa in the north with the Nicobaris here wouldn't be accurate since their lives and histories are entirely different, there is enough to suggest that if integration is carefully planned and sensitively implemented, it can be a win-win situation. Today, having recovered from the horror of the tsunami, the Nicobarese islanders have returned to their normal lives, fishing, farming, continuing to revere their ancient traditions while embracing modernity. Today, Car Nicobar has produced doctors and engineers. 50 years ago, people on the island were semi-naked.
जैसे पहले भी था वैसा भी है अभी. We'll never forget that. हम लोग का परंपरा, हम लोग का जो ये रीति रिवाज था, हम लोग कभी नहीं भूलता है. The same we are following.
For all those concerned about what would happen to tribal populations if they were integrated with the rest of the country, it's not a bad story at all. On the island of Car Nicobar, this is an example of how a tribal community has been perfectly integrated. And those who have concerns about other populations, like the Jarawa community for example, need to perhaps take this into account as well. This is an example of how a present government initiative, the Narega scheme, perfectly dovetails into the requirements of people on this particular island. This is a community garden. The land continues to be owned as per the old customs by the people of this area, but they get paid for what they cultivate over here. Not only do they cultivate it, they can sell it as well whenever they need to. It's a scheme that works well. A tribal population in an area which is now being developed in schemes which work in both senses. As I leave this beautiful island and fly back to Port Blair, I cannot help but compare the lives of people on Car Nicobar with the way of life chosen by the Jarawa. It's tempting to argue that keeping one's distance from the Jarawa is the equivalent of pushing a community of human beings back into the jungle. But that's condescending to the way of life chosen by the Jarawa, their ancient traditions and their destinies that only they can carve out. At the same time, the pace of what we call modern life and the needs of lakhs of people who live to the north of the island cannot be forgotten. Can there ever be an answer to this great conundrum? I came looking for answers and I found none.